And one is a game that I played, which I found very instructive and maybe help you out in understanding how do you open up the position, how do you try to find middle game plans in a position, how do you see the pawn structures, how what information can you get from the pawn structures, so on and so forth. Suppose this game was played by me. I was playing as white. I started with the natural d4. Opponent played knight f6. I played c4. He played e6. Now, this is a normal way to play. The whole idea is if I play knight to c3, they can play bishop to b4, and it goes into a lot many different variations. It's called as the Nimzo Indian defense. So I wanted to avoid all those things because I know if my opponent is playing this setup, he will be knowing good lines in Nimzo. So I wanted to avoid all those things. I wanted to bring my opponent out of preparation. So I played knight to f3, and he anyways went for bishop to b4 check. Now here, because the knight is not on c3, I have the option that instead of putting the knight on c3, I can put bishop on d2. And this is called as the Bogo Indian, not the Nimzo. It's called as the Bogo Indian opening. And I'm not so sure that many people are not so much aware of the theory in Bogo Indian. So I was comfortable in bringing my opponent in the Bogo Indian setup. He went back. And now the question comes that how do we bring out our pieces? Now see, the main idea with bishop check, bishop goes d2 and bishop back is that usually we don't want to move our pieces more than once. But people in the Bogo Indian, they go check, force you to play bishop here, and then they go back. The whole idea is they are ready to play d5 and normal chess, but I cannot just play e3. So you have to understand that in such kind of openings, you have to find good ways to bring your pieces out. So this is the first topic of today's class, that we have to understand that what are the better ways to bring out our pieces. So instead of e3, which looks like a normal move, we don't want to do that, okay? Because the moment I play e3, my bishop is passive. Also, if I play something like bishop f4, I will not be following the opening principle as of now because I will be forced to move the bishop more than once. Bishop f4 is, by the way, bishop f4, g5 are all natural moves. They are not bad, they are good moves. I played pawn to g3 because instead of playing this and this, I wanted to bring the bishop out in a different way.
Bishop.
Yes. So now we are in this particular setup, and this opening is called as the Queen's Indian opening. So we started with the Queen's Gambit, then the game went on for few moves in the Nimzo Indian, then it shifted to Bogo Indian, where the bishops were like this. And now when the bishops from black are on these two squares, it's called as the Queen's Indian defense. It's very normal that you want to bring out the bishop like this without playing d5. And white always, in such kind of opening, white always tries to go pawn to d5. Hi, Adhav. So white always try to go pawn to d5 move at the right time. I played, so sorry, it was black's chance. So he played knight to e4. And the whole idea with knight e4 is they want to capture the bishop. And then they will be having bishop pair, and I won't be having the bishop pair advantage. Usually what I can do is I can just play d5. And in this particular position, many games have been played at the higher level, at the highest levels also. And the main move has always been pawn to d5 and captures, something like that. But after d5, many people also try to react by capturing the bishop. Just to show you, after this is also one of the lines. But now the whole idea is white has a good amount of space, but black is the one having the bishop pair. So it's very, very equalish position. I wanted to have the bishop pair in my game, so I just captured the knight. Very sensible move. He captured by the bishop. And then if you compare, this bishop is decent. This bishop is also very good actually because it's very active. My bishop is so decent because it's looking at the open diagonal, but this bishop is useless right now. So first of all, we have to see that how can we improve. So first of all, castles, and then bishop to c3. So as I said, in the Queen's Indians opening, when black hesitates in playing the move d5, when I play d5, this bishop becomes super active. Remember, throughout the opening till now, I have not even touched the e2 pawn. The game goes on, and d6 is the move where I want to stop. Now, see, guys, when you start playing an opening, when you complete the opening, and you enter a middle game setup in which most of the pieces are almost out, you have to start looking at pawn structures. Now, this becomes very important for your understanding. If you look at the queen side, over these three pawns, all these pawns are on dark squares. It means the light squares are automatically weak. But the whole point is they have a light square bishop, which if they go back, the bishop will be able to control most of the squares. So that gives you a hint that we want to exchange my light square bishop to their light square bishop. But at the same time, how can we further control, how can we fix the pawn structure onto these particular squares only? Anyone in the chat wants to give some suggestions? How do you fix the pawn structure like this? And that is the
A4.
first. A4 is one suggestion. Okay, something else. So this is where the game gets interesting because their pawns are on dark squares, light squares are weak, and we want to kind of c5. c5 is fine, Gauri, but remember, I don't want to exchange. c5, I'll be losing a pawn. Takes, takes, and bishop takes. So I'll be down a pawn. And also, because I won't be able to do anything with my pawns, his pawn structure will be good. Here, there's a very important move that helps in creating the game. So the move was, you always fix it, guys. As I said, because these pawns are on dark squares, he really wants to play this so that he controls the important squares. So I played d5. And now the bishop is out of where he wants to land on. Pawn captures, and again, pawn captures, and he made the final blunder. Which looks like, okay, this is not a blunder, it looks like a normal move. And remember, if I just capture it, what they will do, they will try to bring the queen out. So something like this should not be done. Why? Because I was already having the bishop developed. Now I'm not having that bishop developed. What I did was I helped black to bring out the queen. And now my b2 pawn is also kind of on pressure. So the better way to react to it is develop a piece and defend, like rook c1. So that if he captures, that's completely fine. You still capture, just to show you. And remember, we are putting pressure on the pawn. He cannot save it now. If he goes here, we have en passant. And look at the weaknesses. This is a hanging pawn. It's the isolated d pawn, right? IQP. Who has attended the class of IQP before? Yes. So this happened actually in the game, and I'll show you how to we defeat. So that's why I just pointed out to this game, because it involved IQP structure. And that's why I wanted to show you guys. So rook c1, he did not capture, obviously. He played c6. Now, after c6, we have to remember that once we capture, he will be having IQP, correct? And in IQP, what were the theories I said? That you have to understand, the more you exchange, the better position it will get for you. Also, all these pawns are on dark squares. It means the bishop should not be there on the board, because then these weaknesses will be huge and they won't be able to protect. So I started with captures, captures, takes, takes. Now, guys, remember, right now we are having two islands. Island means group of pawn chain. They have three islands. So who will be better in the end game? What do you guys think? White is going to be better in the end game. So I want to exchange the queens as well. I want to exchange the bishops as well. Any suggestions? How can I do that? Anyone in the chat? How do I force exchanges? Yes, Gauri, that is the idea. But you have to
So can you go knight to d4?
in the chat, but in the chat.
Oh.
But you have to see how can you force more and more exchanges. So knight d4 is a plan. It's a good plan. But it only forces exchanges of the bishops. How can I force more and more exchanges is what you have to think. It's a good plan, not denying that. But remember, because you are having less islands, you want to remove most of the pieces you can. Same idea, knight d4 is resulting into exchange of bishops, which is fine. But there's a way in which you can exchange more and more pieces. Yes, Arav is right, and he answers for the whole class. So I guess I'll just begin with that. So queen d4 was played. Now, why queen d4 is a good move? Because it first of all forces the exchange of queens, and after takes, we have knight d4 with the same idea. So now, as I said, this is way better because now the queens are not on the board. And now this weakness is a permanent weakness. They cannot protect this weakness. So now if you compare the position, we still have two islands. Black has three islands. Black has to figure out where to develop the knight. So he played knight d7. And now we have to just try to jump on. Rook c7. He played knight f6. Doubling the rook on the open file. Everything very theoretical. g6 to avoid any back ranks. And now I just did not give him any time because he wants to play pawn to d5 and then the knight will be protecting. So what can we do in order to win a pawn here? White to play, win a pawn. Okay, rook c6 is what two students are suggesting. Rook c6 can be done. So after rook c6, suppose I try to protect it by this. And then I'm also having knight to e8 to protect. Remember, rook's on the 7th rank, very good. So not rook c6. Knight c6 is decent. You're attacking.
Sir, I think rook
Yes, got
d d2 rook d2.
d2 is here.
No, d7. D7.
d7, yeah,
Sorry.
rook d, but the knight can take you.
Oh, okay.
So now Gauri has found the answer. So the move was knight to b5. Why this is good? Because you attack two pawns and he cannot protect both of them at the same time. So now he played this and now I captured the other one. Captures, captures. He goes here. Now he's saying, you know what? You can move away. I'll capture the pawn. You go here. I'll
I have a
capture.
question.
Yes.
So when the pawn when you were on b6, when I was on b6, yes. Why didn't you take this pawn?
Because the rook was under attack.
Why didn't you take the other pawn?
Because rook was under attack, right?
So
I
you
have
just
to
use
use.
the rook and okay.
Okay, so everything was very forcing here. And now the whole idea is, guys, that if I go back, I will be just able to capture one pawn and he will be capturing both the pawns. So I don't want that. So I forced exchange of more and more pieces.
Rook to c8.
Yes, rook c8 check. Take, take. This is hanging and this is the point of IQP. You know, the moment you that IQP cannot be pushed, it becomes permanent weakness. That's why capturing on a7 was important because these were connected pawns. But this was always weak. It was like a permanent weak pawn. Okay. So king to f8, bringing out the king towards center. I captured and now white is +2. King e7, knight goes there. By the way, knight can go anywhere back, doesn't matter where. You just need to bring the knight closer. And we land up in this situation where he played this move, trying to attack the pawn. Here I was playing this rapid game, so I kind of mouse slipped. I wanted to play b3 and go for a slower approach. I went for b4 and he captured a pawn, but still white is +1. And now it's a very important technique. So we have seen the opening. How do you do development? We saw some middle game ideas. in which pawn structures were very important and IQP was very important. And now time for endgame theory, that how do you use knight and king and pawns to win the game. So whole idea from white should be creating double weaknesses. If you have done the IQP class well, you must be knowing that double weaknesses are very important in endgames, right? Now, what do I mean by double weaknesses? It can be two things, either double weaknesses for black or double strengths for you. It means if you can create one passer over here, one passer over here, black cannot defend both of them. So that was the main idea. So these pawns are connected on the king side, right? But this pawn is not connected. Same goes for black. So what do you think? The king is required more towards the queen side over here or towards the king side over here? What do you think? Let's take a vote.
King side.
Let's take a vote. Those who say the king is required more on the queen side, show of hands.
Sir, I think queen side. It's much. The king should go to the queen side.
Those who say, okay, Sunway is saying queen side. Okay. So rest of the class is saying king side, I believe. King side. Gauri says king side. Okay. So the whole idea is, guys, this is very important decision. See, right now, if we make the right decision, if we go for the right thought process, we will.
I mean king side. I mean king.
Okay. Okay. Fine. So now let's try to understand. Suppose I'll open a board editor. Okay. And I'll give king here, one pawn here. He has one pawn here, one pawn, and he has maybe one pawn here. Okay, let's say this. His king is, let's say, here. Now, the whole idea is, guys, we don't know how do you progress in this position. Now, suppose if I just remove this pawn, it becomes winning for white without any doubt, right? This should not be of a debate. But if I have to just give a matter of, question, that if I remove this pawn, now this pawn can promote or not promote? Not
Yes,
promote.
sir.
So the whole idea, it is still winning because the king will be involved towards this side and this pawn will be a distraction. But my whole theme is just remove the king from your side. Now think, which pawn of black is important to remove to create a winning chance for white? What do you guys think? The b6 pawn or the g7 pawn? Which is more important to remove from the board?
Chat.
No, anyone can speak.
The b6.
Yeah, the class can agree that b6 is more important for black. Okay, so let's go back to the game. Over here, now, let's go forward. Remember you said b6, right? So I brought the king, he brought the king. Oops. King to opposition, he went back. And now he wants to give checks. All right, he wants to give checks, which is not to be allowed. So I played g4. Knight goes here to try to attack. h3. Every move is making sense, I hope. f4, f5, takes, and now you have to take that decision. Either king to f4 or king to d4, because one move is winning and other move is drawing. This is the risk.
King to d4.
What do you guys think, all of you?
d4.
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 So the whole idea is you want to go towards this side, get this guy, and you will be having a passer. So you don't want to fight on the same side because these pawns are already there. They will take care of these guys, right? But you want to really win this pawn. The moment you remove this pawn from the board, it becomes clearly winning. I went d4, the only move. Check. c4. He's attacking the pawn, so obviously it needs to be protected. He's attacking the pawn, needs to be protected. And now he cannot attack. He goes here, b5. And now can you see his knight is tied down? So his knight will be kind of a permanent defender of the pawn. And my knights will be down, like my knight will be dancing on squares to attack their pawn. I went here with the idea of coming on g3 or f4. f3 to restrict the king activity. And now knight d4. Because you have to understand, you want to bring the knight on c4. From here, I want to bring the knight on c4 to pressure. But how I can find the quick way? So I calculated there, there, probably there, and then there. Knight d4, knight f5, knight check, knight here. And after this, my opponent resigned. Why did he resign? It's very simple to understand, guys.
Maybe
Capture, capture cannot be stopped.
it's a pass.
Okay, it's very simple concept. So what did we learn from this game? We learned that sometimes it's important to learn the pawn structures. You have to, when you play an opening, you try to solve problems of your pieces in the opening. But when you play middle game, you try to solve problems of pawns. Most of the times. I'm not saying it's like a general rule that every time it happens the same way. Maybe your opponent can also end up blundering, right? So we are not counting those games. But most of the times in opening, you try to make sure that you keep your pieces on the right squares. And in the middle game, you try to make sure that you keep your pawns on the right squares. You try to see that how your opponent pawns are placed. And you know the theory, right? If the pawns are placed on one color, other color becomes weak. Okay. Now coming back to a different concept.